How's it going, everybody? This is Captain Kyle, and it's been a little bit since I've made a video. I'm going to make one today because I had some fishing gear out for slow pitch fishing. So I'm going to make a video tailored to slow pitch fishing, but in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a lot of videos on slow pitch, and it just like anything else, everything doesn't apply the same in every area. So I'm gonna talk about what's worked for me. You can do it however you want, but if you're new, maybe you've never tried it before, and you mainly fish in the Gulf of Mexico, specifically like Southwest Florida area, this might be a good video just to give you some introduction on slow pitch fishing, so you kind of maybe get an idea on tackle and how to sort of do it. So here in Southwest Florida, we mainly fish for groupers and snappers, and that works great for slow pitch fishing, slow pitch style fishing, because that type of fishing, that type of jig fishing is more focused on like bottom species. So you have vertical jigging, you've probably heard of, and that is that can get stuff off the bottom, but a lot of that is ripping a jig through the water column and you let it fall, then you rip it back up through the water column pretty high. You work all different depths with that. Slow pitch is specifically really designed for the bottom stuff living on the bottom, your groupers and snappers, mainly your groupers. In our area out of Cape Coral, Fort Myers area, we mainly fish for like red groupers. We get gag groupers, there's black groupers, and all kinds of stuff, but a lot of red groupers and gags and stuff like that. So we fish a lot of, say, on the shallow end, maybe 65 foot of water, and then on the upper end, for those type of things, even our ARS, American Reds, we might be in that 200, stuff. I personally fish that, and then I've even taken this out to like 600 foot, like way out in the Gulf of Mexico, and done some fishing out there. And it's pretty much the same, but you'll step up the grams a little bit on your jig, but we don't have some of the factors that the East Coast guys have to deal with. So we can set up our tackle a little differently in our favor, and since you can, you may as well. So a lot of the info you'll get will be, again, East Coast stuff if you watch a lot of slow pitch, because they do a lot more of it. For whatever reason, it's more popular over there. However, we actually have the best bottom for it, because our bottom fishing is way better. We have probably the best bottom fishing, in the area, north of Tampa on down to the Keys on our side is amazing. We've got miles and miles and miles of bottom fishing, where the East Coast only has so much of it, and then they run out, they're too deep. So most of the tackle is going to be one of these micro style reels. There's all different brands. This one's inaccurate. It's a really expensive one. You don't have to spend this kind of money, but you really want to get a small reel. Go to a local tackle shop and go to one that has slow pitch type gear and get a micro reel and a micro rod. It really is the way to go. It's a lot more enjoyable to fish with something like this, these acid wrap style rods, than to try to do it on a spinning tackle. I mean, you can, if you just want to try it and buy the jigs, you totally can do it. It's just not quite as enjoyable, and they don't work the jigs quite as well. So anyway, once you figure out your rod and reel setup, if you're just going to use a spinning reel or use whatever you have to start, or you decide to purchase a reel and an actual rod, the line is going to be important. On the East Coast, these guys fish pretty deep. They'll fish 400 to 1,000 feet, and they're fishing in a lot of current. They're fishing super deep all the time. Most of our fishing isn't deep. Most of our fishing, again, is going to be in that 90, 75, whatever foot to maybe 200 foot. So we're not fishing quite as deep, and then on top of that, we aren't dealing with all that current. They're dealing with very heavy currents, and we're just not. We don't have that here. So they're braid. You have to use braided line on your reel, or you're not going to be able to get down there. So your main line is going to be braid always. You'll have a top shot on there of maybe 15 feet or so, and I like to use maybe 50-pound or 60-pound. I use monofilament. You can go a little lighter, maybe 40, but if you're doing a lot of grouper stuff, you can do that 50 or even 60-pound. But for the braid, East Coast guys, they're 12-pound tests, 15, 20, up to maybe 30. Over here, we're 30 or 40. You know, you can get by with 30 or 40-pound because, again, we don't have the current, and 40-pound cuts through 200 foot of water like it's not even there. It just cuts through it really well. So this reel specifically has 40-pound, and I have another reel that's a twin that has 30-pound braid on it. Okay, so that's kind of your setup. You know, again, try your spinner first if you want to. But if you're actually going to purchase something, go to a local shop and, you know, put some of that stuff in your hand, and you'll be able to feel the difference, how light the rod and reel is, and it's just more comfortable to really fish with and really get a good experience with slow pitch fishing if you get into it. Let's go over some of the jigs. Again, and this is why I made this video and tailored it more towards the Gulf of Mexico fishing, because a lot of the guys on the East Coast, you hear a lot about grams. How many grams do I use if I'm in 450 foot to 600 foot or whatever? And that makes a difference, but it doesn't make as much difference on our coast. You definitely have to have a heavier jig if you're going to fish deeper, but also some of that depends on your jig design. So I'm going to show you a couple different types of jigs, and these are big jigs, but just to show you the difference. So these are two separate jigs. This top jig, as you can tell, you know, it's kind of got, it's sort of fat up here at the top, and then it's flat at the bottom, versus this jig is kind of more torpedo-y shaped. They're the exact same weight. Okay, these two jigs weigh the same amount. This jig is not going to fly through the water as well as this one. This one's going to go down super fast. Okay, this one's going to flutter a lot more, so it takes a little longer to get down. If you were in super deep water, you know, this one might get down there a little better or faster. However, this jig, if you can get it down there, it's going to have more action. So it kind of depends. You can step down to even something smaller. Okay, this jig's actually 150, and this one is a 100 grain jig. Okay, this jig, believe it or not, will fish better as far as getting down faster. If I'm drifting or whatever, this one will get down faster and cut through the water better than this jig. Okay, even though this one's heavier, it's just the design. Okay, the design of this jig will allow it to slip through the water a little faster. So when you buy jigs, don't pay attention as much as the weight, although it's important, it's the design. So as far as a reference, maybe something just to start with, again, we're talking red groupers, red snappers, 70 foot out to maybe 200 foot. I have found that a 200 gram jig in either this style or the more flat style like this one, okay, that's a big one, but you know, 200 gram in our depth zone does very well. This one you'll be able to fish a little deeper if you have a 200 gram jig. This one right here seems to, you know, that's about where you're pushing it at 200 feet with this jig. It starts to scope out quite a bit, especially if you're drifting. Now if you're holding it still, no problem, even beyond 200. This jig specifically, this design, this color, this everything, it's a JYG brand jig, and I have found it is amazing. I've caught everything in the Gulf of Mexico specifically on this jig. When you buy these jigs, they come like this one. They're bare bones, okay? There's nothing on them. They're just literally a jig. You have to buy the snap rings, and you have to buy the hooks. They all come with hooks on the top and the bottom, and snap rings on the top and the bottom. So because of that, you would need to get a pair of split ring pliers. The split ring pliers, if you haven't seen those, this isn't a set, but it looks like a pair of pliers, but one then specifically will have a tooth on there, and that allows you to grip and spread those split rings to slip these hooks and split rings onto the jig itself. Okay, so that's how that works. The way these jigs work, so you can learn how to fish them a little bit better, and that's why you do want to have hooks on both sides. Okay, you don't want to put them on one side and fish it like a regular vertical jig. A lot of those only have hooks on one side. These need to have hooks on both sides because they're very well weighted, almost perfectly balanced, and the way these fly through the water, you want to have them on both sides. So I don't have hooks swinging around. I'll use this one for kind of demonstration. So how these jigs work, again, this isn't vertical jigging. I mean, it is vertical, meaning up and down, but it's not your typical traditional vertical jigging. The jigs look very similar, but these are fished specifically mainly for the bottom species. So these jigs, when they are dropped in the water, are kind of designed to do this. Okay, they swing side to side, they'll come this way and back and whatever, but they mainly stay fairly flat and they wiggle wobble like this onto the bottom. They're so perfect that way. When you drop this in the water and you just have your thumb off the spool and you let it start to fall, you're going to notice it going down and the line on your reel is just kind of coming off. If you were to take your thumb and you want to and apply a little bit of pressure onto the spool, not enough obviously to stop it, but just enough to take this jig, instead of doing this, you apply a little bit of pressure, say we're tied to this end, and you angle the jig now like this, and it starts to, instead of doing this, the jig just rocket ships down. And what you'll actually notice, it's kind of crazy, is you'll notice the line coming off the reel, and as you put pressure on there, it just speeds up. It gets real fast and it rocket ships down to the bottom. Okay, so that will get your jig actually down faster to the bottom by applying just a little bit of pressure to the spool. So keep that in mind when this thing gets to the bottom, and how this thing actually works. The fish will typically not hit this on the way up. Okay, they're going to hit it on the fall 90% of the time or more. So this jig, when it's on the bottom and I take my rod and I jig it up, I'm shooting this jig up in the air. Okay, and then what I want this thing to do is naturally, as it's designed to do, all the action's built into the jig, is just fall like this. And that fish, somewhere between the top of where I jigged it and down, will come up and hit that thing. You don't know when your strike has happened, okay, because you don't have, when you're fishing this thing properly, you don't have tension on the line when it gets hit. Okay, so I'll show you how this thing works. When you're fishing this jig, your motion with the rod, right now we're going to pretend I've dropped my jig and I've just got to the bottom. So right now my rod is down and the jig is on the bottom. I'm going to jig this thing up and immediately come back down. Okay, if I do that, what I've done is shot the jig up in the air, and okay, so I've shot it up in the air and I bring my rod tip back down. That's going to allow this thing to fall. Okay, if I jig it up in the air and I don't bring the rod down, what happens is I catch the lure and I start that downward trajectory of the lure, and it just rocket ships back down to the bottom. You don't get the action of the jig if you catch it. You want to bring it up and then come back down with it. You might catch it right at the bottom, but ideally you're shooting it up and coming back down. Counting to 1, 2, shoot it back up, and then you come back down. That allows the jig to work properly again, because the strike is going to be on that fall somewhere. So if you shoot it up pretty good, you may shoot the jig 15 feet up off the bottom. Depending on how high you come up. A lot of your jigs will be kind of little. So this is how I would fish it: up and down, up and down. And then I might have one good one where I bring it up and then come back down with it. But again, always remember, you're not catching the jig mid-water column. You want to shoot it up, get your rod tip back down, and let that line just go through the water so it swims. You want that jig to swim like it's designed to do. When you get a strike, it's really strange because you'll have jigged it up, and then when you come back down, somewhere in between that 3 seconds, 5 seconds, between your next one, that fish has ate it and you don't know it. So when you go to jig again, and if you've been doing this for 20 minutes, you kind of get in a little rhythm. And all of a sudden, okay, it's ate it, and then when you go to get it again, you're gonna notice like a snag. So it's almost like a double pump, and then you get some heat on it. And that's just kind of how the slow pitch thing is. It's a super fun way to fish. Very good strikes. You'll catch all kinds of different fish with it, but you kind of got to learn how to do it correctly. You got to get the right jigs, the right hooks. I would start, if you're gonna, before you buy just a ton of different jigs, start with about a 200 gram. That'll let you get the majority of our depths, whether you're fishing in 75 again out to maybe 200. This is a great color combination. Pretty much all these jigs are designed to glow. If you notice all these little hashtags on here, like this, even though that's a huge jig, what this will actually represent is a bunch of little fish swimming together. So in something like this, you'd be surprised how many fish you'll catch that are literally only this big, because they think they're hitting a small, pod of bait fish. And anyway, that's something that happens from time to time. When you go to a tackle shop, again, they'll have the jigs. They're going to be like this, and then you'll have to get split ring style, split rings or whatever, these guys, and then your hooks will come like this. So unfortunately, that's one side and that's another side, so you'll have to get two sets to complete your jig. In a nutshell, that's basically it, guys. I gave you a little bit of information on how to fish them. Again, with the Gulf of Mexico, you can step up your braid size. We get a lot of fish that get, they rock you up. So you can step up your braid size, in my opinion, the Gulf of Mexico. I use that 40 out here, to 500-600 feet without really any problem. And because we don't have the current, why not go a little heavier if you can, versus try to, use 15-pound test like they recommend, or 20 like they do on the East Coast. We just don't need to do that. We can step up our braid size and not get rocked up as much and not lose as many fish. Remember, when you're fishing your jig, it's bottom fishing. It's not like jigging you've ever done. So it's bottom fishing. And then think about that jig in the air. When you jig it up, think about the motion that I don't want to catch this thing. I want it to flutter all the way to the bottom. So when I shoot it up, I want to come back down and wait for it to land on the bottom, and then wait a second and jig it up again. Same thing, I don't want to catch it. I continually want to let that bait go all the way to the bottom, because that's where your strike's going to happen, is during that flutter on the way down. If you do that, you'll have pretty good luck. One thing about these lures and this type of fishing, it's kind of dangerous, if you will. The hooks are extremely sharp. These fish get hooked in the face and then in the side, and they're flipping around. The best thing I can recommend is to get like one of the Bubba long like hook removers, or super long needle nose. You definitely want to use that and not try to get a short pair of pliers in there and take those hooks out. You end up with hooks in your hand pretty quick, especially if you hook on something that's flopping around like snappers, and specifically snappers do, but groupers too. Get those long pliers, buy several jigs, and have a lot of fun with them. Man, it's a great way to fish. That's pretty much all I got. It's about 18-minute video. If you guys want any more videos, have any other questions, comment. If you want to see a video on something specifically, I'd be glad to do it for you. I think pretty soon, I do really well on the red grouper species. I'm thinking about doing a video pretty soon, maybe out, and what I'll do is show you guys on my boat my electronics. Some guys have a tough time distinguishing grouper versus snappers, and what am I looking for, and to actually see it on the machine, and I can show you like what a grouper will look like, and kind of what you're looking for in that hard bottom stuff. You probably hear that all the time, hard bottom, hard bottom. I can show you what that looks like on my machine, and you can kind of duplicate it. I can go over electronics, like what you sort of need. You don't have to spend a ton of money, but you do need the right stuff. I've got friends, they've got $1 million boats, but their electronics suck. So I'd rather be on a John boat that's got good electronics, because if you can't find the bottom on our coast, we're not looking for birds and all that. Everything's on the bottom. Or mid-water column, maybe suspended a little bit. But if you don't have good electronics, a good bottom machine, you're not going to catch fish here. So you got to have the right stuff. And again, it's not a ton of money in the hindsight of a boat, but you got to have the right stuff. But whatever you guys want to see, if you want to see something specific, again, let me know. I'm going a little long, about 20 minutes now. But anyway, thanks for your time, guys. And hit me a like, and again, let me know any information you want to see. I'll gladly make a video. Talk to you later. Thanks.